In the last episode, Andrea gave up her handsome boyfriend and decided to go back to the prison to warn Rick. However, she was ambushed by the governor just as she arrived at the prison gate. Meanwhile, the governor's men went to a pit where they collected zombies. When Tyrese learned that these zombies were meant to be used against the people in the prison, he and his sister immediately spoke out against it. There were elderly people and babies in the prison, and they were all good people. Tyrese told Alan that they refused to do this and they could just leave the town if necessary. However, Alan refused to do so and was willing to do anything to stay. Tyrese and Alan had a disagreement about this and they ended up fighting each other. Sasha discouraged they. Late at night, a car arrives. A mysterious person poured gasoline on the zombies in the car and burned them all, then drove away. The next day, the self-defense team came to the pit to check, but all they found was the residual black smoke and stench. The zombies had already been burned to ashes. Tyrese was the main suspect in this incident since he openly opposed the plan during the day. The governor was extremely hypocritical and always appeared polite in front of others. Tyrese said he didn't care about the governor's feud with Rick, but he couldn't let Rick's child be fed to the zombies. The governor immediately denied this and said that nobody was feeding anyone to the zombies. They were just trying to scare them away, and he would rather save more lives than use violence. The governor's attitude and tone were particularly sincere. Tyrese and his sister were not suspicious and immediately apologized to the governor, saying that they shouldn't have questioned him. They also stated that they really wanted to stay and wouldn't act impulsively again. The governor was very satisfied and left. Before leaving, he asked Tyrese and his sister where they got the gasoline. They were both puzzled, and the governor knew from their reaction that they were not the ones who burned the zombies. When he left, he was already thinking about whether there was a traitor in the town. Milton found the governor and asked if Andrea was still alive. The governor said she might still be alive, he hadn't found her yet. Milton then mentioned the burnt zombies and said it was a pity. He hoped the governor could find out who did it. Milton, a kind-hearted man, asked the question, but his expression was extremely unnatural. The governor, being a shrewd person, already had an answer in his heart. Meanwhile, Rick has decided to trade Michonne in exchange for safe passage out of the prison. He needed Daryl's help to do this, but Daryl was reluctant since they were not that kind of people. However, this was Rick's decision, and he didn't have a choice but to comply to avoid casualties. Rick also needed someone else to help him, and that person was Merle. No one was more suitable than him to do this dirty work. Merle was a bit surprised that Rick would go for such a thing, but he calmly explained that he had followed the governor before and killing was always done by smashing their brains or slitting their throats to avoid wasting bullets. However, he knew that this was just an excuse for the governor's bloodlust. If Rick handed over Michonne to the governor wouldn't kill her but would torture her instead. He might even gouge out one or both of her eyes. Was Rick willing to let this happen for a faint promise? Merle felt a twinge of sadness for the once friendly cop who had become so cold and ruthless. Merle wasn't opposed to the plan, but he knew Rick well enough to know that he didn't have the courage to carry it out. Rick didn't wait for Merle to finish. Rick interrupted and said they had to hand over Michonne to the governor before noon. At that moment, Rick heard a commotion outside and quickly grabbed his gun and went to investigate. Fortunately, there was no sudden attack. Carl and the others were outside the fence luring zombies, and Maggie was also involved. They worked with each other and placed a barbed wire in the middle of the road. Rick watched as everyone worked so hard to prepare for war, especially Michonne, who was also actively involved. When the car returned, he ran over and opened the door. Glenn said that if the governor attacked, the spike strips would come in handy. Daryl quickly added that it was Michonne's idea. Michonne also spoke up and said they didn't have to defeat them, just show them that attacking them would be more than worth it. Rick was a little shaken after hearing and looked at everyone working together to defend their home. He and Daryl exchanged a glance, and Daryl naturally hoped that Rick would change his mind. Merle watched from upstairs and understood that Rick's group would definitely change their minds and not do such a thing. And so it is. Rick went to the corner of the prison and found a network cable, which he planned to use to tie Michonne's hands. She probably wouldn't be able to break free from it. Rick struggled with his decision for a long time and then looked up to see Lori again, as if reminding him not to make a mistake. In the end, Rick decided to follow his heart, threw the rope away, and quickly left the area. When he got back to the cell, Herschel stopped him. Then Rick found Daryl and told him the plan was cancelled. They were going to face the governor head-on. Daryl was relieved because he would support Rick, but that didn't mean he was willing to do it. No matter how much the world changed, he had his own bottom line and principles. But Rick said he couldn't find Merle and Michonne. They're gone. Daryl felt uneasy, and they eventually found some traces on the ground. It seemed that Merle had taken Michonne. Daryl volunteered to go after them. Rick needs to stay and run the show. Merle was on his way to the trade. Knowing full well that Rick was the type of person who would change his mind, he was well suited for the dirty work, and he wasn't particularly concerned about the prison's well-being. But Daryl saw the prison as home, which was why he ambushed Michonne and took her to meet with the governor. After a while, Merle found himself in a village and found a usable car. This can be much faster now. On the way, Michonne didn't resist much and instead tried to persuade Merle to turn back and be with his brother. They might not make it back if they continued on this path. Merle understood this. How could he not know what governor was? But he couldn't go back now. He and the prison group weren't on the same side, and everyone saw him as a demon. Eventually, Merle stopped the car and cut Michonne's ropes, telling her to go back and prepare for battle. He then left the area in the car, perhaps the first time he had ever done something good-hearted. Finally, the car stopped in front of a bar, and Merle turned the music up to attract the attention of countless zombies. His plan was to go to the trade location alone. Merle arrived at the farm with the zombies and found an opportunity to jump out of the car. He was familiar with the terrain and hid in a room. The governor's men who were lying in wait heard the music and ran towards it. Not Rick! It's in with bunch of zombies. While they were shooting, Merle took advantage of the chaos and shot and killed 2 men who were alone. The scene was too chaotic, and Merle switched windows constantly. Shooting at the self-defense team, he aimed at the governor and fired, but accidentally hit someone else. A zombie appeared next to Merle, and he had to deal with it. During the struggle, he accidentally pushed it out the door, and he was met with a severe beating. The governor was furious. Not only was this guy a traitor, but he was also now ruining his plan. After a severe beating, Merle was killed by the governor. Rick gathered everyone and confessed to the plan to trade Michonne. He said that he had intended to do it, but he changed his mind. Merle had already taken Michonne, and they didn't know if Daryl could catch up and stop them. Rick apologized for not telling everyone about this. After the destruction of the farm last year, Rick had said that he could only be a dictator, but now he realized that this was inhumane, despite the changes in the world. But there are still some bottom lines that must be followed from now on. They would decide together on what to do. No one else could be sacrificed for the greater good. They were all part of the bigger picture. They themselves are the reason for living. They could either choose to leave and escape or choose to stay and fight. They had to be united. The group voted on the next decision, and no matter what the outcome was, they were a family and could fight or run together. After Rick spoke, he left to give everyone time to think. When he arrived at the watchtower, Michonne had returned, but Daryl was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Daryl had arrived at the trade location. It was littered with zombie and human corpses, and the governor's people had already left. But he saw something that made him stop in his tracks. Merle's ambush had made the governor furious, and he took out his anger on Milton. The person he hated the most now was anyone who went against him. Milton had finally seen Andrea, who had been locked up by the governor. The governor ordered Milton to bring him his tools, and he had no choice but to comply. Due to his injuries, he accidentally dropped one of the tools on the ground. He had to kneel down to pick it up, and when he picked up the last pair of pliers, he froze for a couple of seconds. The angle was just right where the governor couldn't see it. Milton hoped that it could help Andrea, and when he took it out, the governor suddenly had a new idea. He grabbed Milton and ordered him to use the knife to kill Andrea, to show where his loyalty stood. Milton had no choice but to comply. Otherwise, they would both die. He slowly approached Andrea, but suddenly turned around and stabbed the governor instead. The governor had already been prepared and killed Milton in retaliation. He then locked the door and made Andrea watch as he had Milton turned into a zombie and eat her. Meanwhile, back at the prison, everyone was packing up and preparing to leave. Daryl had returned and was shocked to learn that his brother had done something good before his death. He didn't have time to mourn, though, as he had to protect his family. Rick apologized to Michonne for almost agreeing to hand her over to the governor. Michonne understood and said that she had a good intuition, which is why she chose to leave the town and come to the prison. As Rick and the others were packing up, the governor was rallying his troops, shouting that these criminals had killed 13 of their people. He claimed that they were no different from the zombies and that they had to defend their home. Today, they would finally settle the score. Tyrese interrupted the governor and said that they had decided not to participate in this fight. This was not their war, and they only fought against the zombies, not innocent people. Tyrese would stay behind to protect the children, and they wouldn't mind leaving if they were asked to. The governor was seething with anger, but he didn't show it. He didn't want to ruin his image in front of the townspeople. He handed Tyrese a sniper rifle and asked him to protect the place well. The governor's convoy arrived at the prison with 4 cars and over 10 people. This time, he didn't want to play games with Rick and went straight in with all his firepower. intending to crush them. Before they could enter the prison, the machine guns on the roof of the car began to sweep the sentry towers in front of them, snuffing out any sneak attacks, and several cars soon came to a halt. Everyone in the cars had weapons and began shooting, not only at the prison but also at any zombies that got in their way. However, so far, there had been no sign of any resistance. The group stormed into the prison, which was just as quiet and empty as the outside. Alan had been to the prison before and knew the layout, so he led the group inside. When they came inside, it was equally empty. Governor was puzzled. Had they already escaped? He immediately ordered his men to split up and search. However, as they made their way through the corridors, someone threw several flash and smoke grenades from an unknown location, causing chaos among the group. Governor shouted for them to remain calm, but nobody listened. To make matters worse, there were zombies inside as well. Since the people who joined the army were originally ordinary citizens, they panicked when surrounded by zombies and quickly fled the scene. Glenn was already lying in ambush on the second floor corridor and started shooting at anyone he saw, while Maggie intercepted them on the other side. This was Rick and the group's plan, to let the non-combatants hide in the forest while the others lay in wait inside the prison. They didn't need to eliminate everyone, just so they know there's a price to pay for coming here. Self-defense forces flee in disarray, forgetting why they had come in the first place and fearing getting hit by bullets. When they saw the retreating team, the battle was easier than they had imagined. Even Rick and the others didn't need to make an appearance. The group was so scared that they fled. And they had won. Rick and the others thought that the governor would not stop fighting, so it was best to pursue them and not let everyone live in fear and worry. However, while driving away, Governor ordered his men to pull over. As soon as he got out of the car, he started to curse loudly. How could so many people be scared away by just 2 people? The residents had already realized that this was not self-defense as Governor had claimed, but rather a massacre. Some of them began to shout. Listening to these harsh words, Governor's face slowly became twisted, and he started shooting with the rifle in his hand. Thought he was just going to kill 2 men to establish his authority, but didn't expect the governor to fire wildly and kill them both. He went on a killing spree, and both of his followers were scared. Governor had eliminated these people, and the world was finally quiet. All that remains is Alan, who, somewhat alarmed, pointed his gun at Governor. For such a character, Governor calmly pulled out his pistol, already expecting Alan to be afraid to shoot. The 2 subordinates were a little scared. Governor didn't do anything to them, but went to the people he had just killed, to check if they were alive. Woman was also incredibly nervous at the moment, having just been pinned down by the corpses and escaping with her life. And it was only after Governor had fired 1 shot and had no more the bullet was gone, so he took his 2 men and left. Andrea was still trying to pick up the tweezers with her foot, but she was also keeping an eye on Milton's body, fearing that he would turn into a zombie. This time, the tweezers were successfully picked up and slowly passed towards her hand. Andrea exhaling for fear of waking Milton up. After a few minutes, she finally got the tweezers into her hand. At that moment, Milton's hand responded. Rick and the others had also arrived on the road and found the scene. They didn't know what had happened, how all these people had died here. They found the girl who had been lucky enough to survive and found out from her what had happened. At night, the men arrived at the entrance to the town, and as soon as they approached they were spotted. The 2 sides immediately engaged in a firefight. It was the Tyrese siblings who were guarding the fence, and instead of Governor returning, "It's Rick, the girl came straight out and told Tyrese not to shoot, then said that Governor had shot at them and killed everyone and that Rick and the others saved her." Tyrese siblings can't believe it. Rick also shouted, "Don't shoot." They talked face to face and then stepped forward with his hands in the air. Tyrese opened the door straight away and asked what they were doing here. Rick said they had come here to finish the job, but they had seen what Governor had done. The girl said Andrea had gone over the wall to the prison earlier, but they never saw her, and Rick suspected she had been caught by Governor again. Tyrese led them straight to where Governor was holding people, and as soon as they entered they saw the blood on the floor and already had a bad feeling. Only pray that it wasn't Andrea. As soon as they opened the door they saw Milton lying on the floor and Andrea on the side of the door. Andrea collapsed against the door, thankfully alive, but unfortunately, she had been bitten. The atmosphere was instantly oppressive. Andrea asked how the people in their prison were doing and Rick reassured her by saying that she belonged to them too, that they were family and that they all alive and well. Relieved, Andrea smiled and told Michonne that she was glad she had left town and joined their family. Michonne was already sobbing. She and Andrea had spent 8 difficult months together and they had become sisters. Many viewers thought Andrea was stupid, but in fact she was just easily confused by appearances and never wanted anyone to get hurt. She was a girl who screamed in the face of zombies, but slowly learned to use a gun, to kill them in close quarters, to stand up for Carol when she was in danger. This strong girl deserves to be remembered by all. Now Andrea is begging, she has to fix herself. She doesn't want to leave them with this problem. Rick handed the gun to Andrea and she looked at them sadly. But then she was relieved to see her good friends and family before she died. She is already happy. They closed up the room and Michonne stayed with Andrea. In the early morning, a large truck drove into the prison. Governor was not dead yet. The war was definitely not over yet. Rick looked away. This time Lori didn't show up again. Their team had grown in size. His responsibilities had grown and his decisions were harder.